Everyone thinks the real battles are fought overseas, but they've never tried to bring an old tractor back to life in the middle of a suburban HOA. After 22 years in the Army, I thought I'd finally come home to quiet. Quiet cornfields, quiet mornings, quiet air that didn't smell like diesel and gunpowder. My father's land had been waiting, sitting still under the big sky since the day he passed. The barn sagged, the fence leaned, and weeds had swallowed the edges, but it was still ours, still mine, and I wasn't chasing peace. I was rebuilding it. The house was small, paint faded, siding gray, roof patched more times than I could count. But when you've slept in tents in war zones, a two-bedroom rancher feels like a castle. I poured my coffee slow in the mornings, stared out across those cracked rows of earth, and told myself one thing over and over. This is home now. No one can take it from me. But I was wrong. Because the third morning after I moved back, I heard a knock at my door. Not a friendly knock. Not the kind you give when you're bringing over a pie. This was sharp, demanding, the kind of knock that says, I'm in charge here. I opened the door wearing a worn-out t-shirt, still holding my second cup of coffee. And there she was, Karen. 50-something, stiff hair lacquered like armor, sunglasses perched on her head though the sun wasn't even up yet. And in her hand, a clipboard. Of course, she didn't smile when she introduced herself, she declared it. Karen Netter, president of the Stone Creek Estates HOA. She didn't ask how I was settling in. She didn't ask if I needed anything. Instead, she leaned just far enough to peek past me into my house and said, "We just wanted to clarify a few property expectations." I almost laughed right there on the porch. Expectations on my land, I pointed out across the field. This isn't part of Stone Creek. My family's owned this place for 3 generations. There's no HOA jurisdiction here. Her smile twitched, just a tiny crack in her armor. But then she snapped it back into place and said, Stone Creek has visual covenants. What happens on adjacent properties affects community values, things like tractors or unsightly tools. Her tone made it sound like she was talking about rusted-out cars in a junkyard. Not a machine my father had bled and sweated over. Not the tractor that had pulled us through harvests when I was a boy. I didn't argue, didn't even answer. I just held her stare long enough for silence to say what words couldn't. Finally, she huffed, muttered something about community standards and walked away, heels clicking against the stone like gunfire. I thought that was the end of it. It was. Within a week, a typed notice showed up on my porch. Not mailed, delivered by hand. It said my equipment was a visual nuisance, that it might violate setback expectations. She even quoted some obscure code that only applied inside her subdivision. I tossed it straight into the trash. But Karen wasn't done. One afternoon, I was cleaning out the barn when I heard it, a faint buzzing overhead. At first, I thought it was a mosquito, then I looked up. A drone hovered above my field, dipping low enough to rustle the tall grass. A camera, watching me, recording, and I didn't need to guess who was holding the remote. Karen's second-story balcony had the perfect view of my land. That night, I found out just how far she'd go. A friend forwarded me a copy of the Stone Creek digital newsletter, and there it was, a picture of my tractor, my father's tractor. Captioned, "New neighbor raises safety concerns, heavy machinery near school bus stop." I stared at the screen until my jaw ached from clenching. She wasn't just filing complaints. She was painting me as a danger, to neighbors, to children, to the entire community. Still, I didn't budge, because I knew something Karen didn't. This land was mine, not just sentimentally. Legally, deeds, surveys, permits, everything in order. The tractor she mocked, registered, inspected, and fully operational under state farm use regulations. I'd fought for rights overseas. I wasn't about to surrender them on my own soil. But here's the thing about people like Karen. When rules don't bend their way, they start breaking them. And though I didn't know it then, her war against me was only just beginning. By the time harvest season came around, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd back off. But I should have known better. People like Karen don't quit, they escalate. The morning sun hadn't even cleared the trees when I fired up the tractor for the first real yield since I came home. The old engine roared to life, rattling but steady, honest in a way that only machines built decades ago can be. As the field lit up gold, I felt something swell in my chest. Pride. Hope. A small piece of my father's voice echoing in memory. Make the land work, son, and it'll take care of you. But across the fence, someone else was watching. Karen. She stood on a little garden stool, wearing a hat so wide it could have been an umbrella, phone raised high like a weapon. She wasn't waving. She wasn't smiling. She was filming. I drove on, row after row. Dust rose behind me in soft clouds, caught in the sun like smoke. When I circled back toward the edge of the field, her gestures grew more frantic, pointing, shaking her head, covering her nose. I parked the tractor and walked over, sweat dripping down my back, rag in hand. "Morning," I said, calm as I could. "This is unacceptable," she snapped. Her little dog barked under her arm like it was backing her up. "You're choking the neighborhood with dust. My patio cushions are ruined. I can't breathe over the diesel fumes." I looked back at the field, rows swaying in the wind. "It's corn harvest, Karen. Been done this way for decades. I'm not doing anything illegal." Her face flushed crimson. "This is a residential area. You're disturbing the peace." "This," I said firmly, pointing to the ground, "is agricultural land. Always has been. You moved next to a farm. Farms harvest. They make noise. They make dust. That's the truth." Her jaw locked tight. For a second, I thought she might actually explode. Instead, she hissed, "You'll hear from the HOA about this." And she stormed back inside, heels clicking like gunshots, dog yapping in rhythm. That night, the email came. Subject line, urgent community concern. The body of the message was pure Karen, demanding I cease all agricultural operations until an HOA review could be conducted. Signed with her title, President, Stone Creek Estates HOA. I laughed out loud. She had no authority over me. None. But she was bluffing hard, hoping I'd cave. Instead, I forwarded the email to my lawyer, an old high school buddy named Jeff who specialized in land use law. His reply was short, "Keep working. She's got nothing." But Karen wasn't done. The next morning, a brand new sign appeared on the HOA side of the fence near the walking trail. Bright yellow, bold letters, "Caution, dangerous farm machinery ahead, children and pets at risk," and beneath it, her phone number. I didn't touch it, just took pictures, time-stamped, saved them to a folder on my computer I'd already named HOA Nonsense. Days later, a county zoning officer showed up, clipboard in hand, polite smile on his face. He walked the boundary with me, asked about my schedule, then chuckled when I showed him the email. "She files complaints weekly," he said, "usually about patio umbrellas or mailbox paint. First time it's about corn." He signed off everything as legal and left shaking his head. Still, she pushed. I couldn't even check my mail in peace without running into her. One morning, she leaned close and muttered, "You have no idea who you're dealing with. People like you don't belong here." I raised an eyebrow. "People like me." She didn't answer, just glared at me like I was mud on her carpet and marched away. That evening, I got a call from Officer Cordell, a young cop I'd known since his Little League days. He sounded almost embarrassed. "Wade, heads up. We got a noise complaint from the HOA, engine running after hours. We logged it, but it's not enforceable. You're fine." I thanked him, but deep down I could feel it. She wasn't going to stop. Noise, dust, fumes, community standards. She'd throw every weapon she had. And harvest was only halfway done. 2 more days, I told myself. 2 more days and the field would be cleared. But I could feel it in my gut, the way you feel a storm rolling in before the clouds even darken. Karen was reaching her breaking point, and when people like her lose control of the rules, they make their own. I didn't know it then, but she was about to do something reckless, something that would change everything. By the second week of harvest, I started sleeping with one eye open, not because I was paranoid, because I'd learned to trust that sixth sense the military gives you, that itch at the back of your neck when someone's plotting. And Karen, she was plotting. It began with small jabs, a bag of lawn clippings dumped over the fence, spray paint scrawled across my wood panels, "Keep it quiet." Anonymous complaints sent inspectors to my barn accusing me of storing fuel unsafely. Each time I opened my doors, showed them my sealed drums, my safety logs, my concrete containment, protocol drilled into me from years overseas, the inspectors left sheepish. Karen stayed furious. But her anger wasn't quiet anymore. One morning I caught her in her Lexus, camera out the window, snapping photos like she was TMZ. Another day, she cornered me at the mailbox, voice low and venomous. "You may think you're tough, but I protect this community, and I will protect it from you." I didn't answer, didn't need to. My silence did more damage than words ever could. By Thursday, I knew it was coming. She crossed the line into vandalism. She'd gone beyond notices and emails, and when people like Karen don't get their way, they break. Saturday morning came quiet, too quiet. I cleared 2 more rows, the tractor thumping steady, the sun glinting off the metal like it had back when my father drove it. For a fleeting moment, I let myself feel peace. Then I heard it. The roar of an engine. Not mine. Karen's Lexus barreled down the gravel easement road, tires spitting dust, moving too fast for that narrow strip. My tractor sat half pulled off the path, blades folded, parked while I checked the irrigation line. She didn't slow down, didn't even tap the brakes. The impact hit like thunder, metal on metal. Her front bumper crumpled against the tractor's quarter panel. The sound echoed across the corn like a gunshot. For a second, the world went still. Then her horn blared, her door flew open, and there she was, phone already in her hand, voice pitched high like a stage actress. "You assaulted me," she screamed, pointing at the tractor like it had lunged at her. "He attacked me with this machine. He left it here on purpose to intimidate me." I didn't move, didn't speak. Just walked forward slowly, every step deliberate, rag still in my hand, my heart hammering in my chest. She dialed 911 on speaker. "Yes, officers, I need help immediately. He hit me with a vehicle, a tractor. He's dangerous, you have to come now." And then she made her fatal mistake. Maybe it was rage, maybe panic. Maybe she thought breaking something would make her story more believable. But she bent down, grabbed a rock from the side of the road and hurled it at my windshield. The glass cracked with a sharp pop, spiderwebbing across the center. Still, I didn't react. Not with words, not with fists. Instead, I just turned my head and stared straight into the lens of the camera I'd hidden in the fence post. It had caught everything. Her speeding down the road. The collision. The false 911 call. The rock through the glass. She had no idea, not yet, but she would. 10 minutes later, the patrol car arrived. Officer Cordell, the same young man she'd weaponized with noise complaints before. She rushed to him like cavalry had arrived, tears at the corners of her eyes, voice trembling with just enough control to sound victimized. "He came out of nowhere, left this machine in the road to terrify me. Look at my car, officer, look what he's done." Cordell followed her gestures, jaw set, eyes sharp. He didn't buy it, not yet. But he didn't dismiss her either. He looked at me across the field, then walked over. "You all right?" he asked. "Fine," I said, nodding at the cracked windshield. "Tractor's not happy, though." "She says you left it in the middle of the road." I shook my head, pulled it to the side while I checked the irrigation valve. Same routine as every morning. She's the one who tore down that easement at 40 miles an hour and rammed into it. Got it on camera. Cordell's eyebrow lifted. "Camera?" I pointed toward the fence post. "Top corner, high raise, full motion, got everything." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a USB drive, labeled, time-stamped, airtight. Cordell slipped it into his uniform pocket. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. I looked back at Karen, arms crossed now, smug smile returning as she waited for me to be cuffed. "I want the truth documented," I said, "and I want her to stop weaponizing the law to try and drive me off my land." Cordell nodded once, firm, understood. When he walked back to Karen, her smile widened, ready for victory. But it faltered when Cordell didn't arrest me, didn't scold me, didn't even question me further. He just said, "We'll review the footage before making a report." Karen sputtered, demanded a supervisor, shouted about being assaulted. But Cordell just slid into his patrol car and drove away, USB drive secure in his pocket. And me, I climbed back into the tractor, turned the engine, and finished my rows. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't fight, it's endure. But deep down I knew Karen wasn't done, not by a long shot. By sunset that day I thought maybe, just maybe, the footage would finally end it. Evidence doesn't lie, cameras don't exaggerate, but Karen, she wasn't wired for surrender. That evening, she stormed out to the property line, her voice cutting sharp across the fence like barbed wire. "You won't get away with this, Coburn. I know people. You'll regret messing with the HOA." I didn't answer. What was there to say? Truth doesn't buckle just because someone shouts louder. Still, her words hung heavy, and sure enough, the very next morning, my lawyer, Jeff, called. "I reviewed the footage. It's airtight," he said. "She thinks she's clever, but she just gave you ammunition. Want me to file a restraining order?" I shook my head, staring out across the corn. "Not yet. Let's see what the sheriff's office does first." The next 2 days were quiet, too quiet. No Lexus in her driveway, no heels clicking on the path. The silence felt wrong, like the pause before a landmine goes off. And then came the squad cars. 2 of them rolling slow down the gravel road like predators stalking prey. Deputies I didn't know stepped out, older men this time. Their faces were unreadable, voices clipped. "Mr. Coburn, we're following up on a complaint." "What's she claiming now?" I asked, arms folded. "Aggravated assault with a vehicle," one replied flatly. "She alleges you intentionally left heavy machinery in the roadway, resulting in a collision. Claims you threatened her verbally. Obstruction of property use." I almost laughed. "You're kidding." "Not even a little," the deputy said. "Do you have surveillance?" "I've got 3 angles," I answered, walking them into the barn. I handed them a fresh drive, time-stamped, unedited, with metadata intact. Every second of her car speeding, the impact, the rock she threw, even her false 911 call. The deputies spent 20 minutes reviewing the evidence in silence. I kept my hands busy, tightening bolts, steadying my breathing. When they came back, their postures had changed. Respectful now, almost apologetic. "Mr. Coburn," one said carefully, "this is what we call an open and shut." The other added, "Frankly, the footage shows she vandalized your property and filed a false report." I nodded once, then file it. They promised to submit everything to the district attorney, then drove off with quiet purpose. I watched their taillights disappear down the gravel, a weight lifting, but only a little, because Karen wouldn't stop. She'd already turned law enforcement into her personal tool. If that failed, she'd find another angle. That night, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I didn't pick up, but I listened later. Her voice spilled through the speaker, shaking but furious. "Wade, you may think your little cameras and tractors make you clever, but this isn't over. You've made an enemy, one that doesn't quit." Click, end of message. I replayed it in my head, not because of the rage, but because underneath it all I heard something else. Desperation. She knew the tide was shifting, she just didn't know how to stop it. 3 days later, Deputy Cordell showed up again. This time in plain clothes, no clipboard, no performance. He knocked on my barn door, folder in hand. "DA's office wants to proceed with charges. Vandalism, false reporting. You'll be asked to testify." "Happy to," I said. He hesitated. "Be careful, Wade. Word is she's pulling strings with folks on the zoning board. She's not done." I smiled grimly. I'm already ahead of her. Because before sunrise that morning, I'd driven to the county clerk's office, pulled every zoning file, every plat map, every developer permit tied to Stone Creek Estates, and what I found was gold. The easement road Karen claimed I blocked, it was conditional, approved only if the developer filed a shared maintenance agreement, one that was never finalized, which meant the HOA had no authority over it, no rights, no claims, nothing. She hadn't rammed my tractor on her road. She'd smashed her Lexus into a legally parked vehicle on property outside her control. When I called Jeff, I could almost hear him grin through the phone. This isn't just a defense, this is leverage. But leverage only matters if you use it right. And Karen, she wasn't slowing down. That afternoon, she marched back to my fence, red tracksuit blazing, HOA newsletter clutched in her fist. "You think you're clever, Coburn, but we're issuing a cease and desist against your operations. You're in violation of noise ordinances, environmental ordinances, and—" I cut her off, calm, steady. I held out a manila envelope thick with documents. "You mean ordinances that don't apply outside your jurisdiction? These are zoning files, development maps, land grants. They prove one thing, Karen. This land isn't yours, never was." She didn't take the envelope, didn't even touch it, just sneered. "We'll see how smart you are when we file for injunction or eminent domain." Her words were sharp, but her eyes flickered. She saw something in mine she couldn't rattle. Veterans call it the quiet edge. The place beyond fear. The place where you've already stood in worse storms and walked away breathing. That night I installed a steel gate across the easement road. Reinforced iron, not blocking a public way, just closing off what was mine. A sign hung across it, laminated bold, private agricultural property, not subject to HOA regulation. Trespassers will be recorded. By morning, the HOA's Facebook page lit up with panic, neighbors accusing me of aggression. Karen posting a 3-paragraph rant about dangerous isolationism. But buried beneath the noise came comments she didn't expect. "Maybe if we stopped harassing the only man out here growing food, we'd all sleep better. My kid loves watching his tractor, leave him alone. The cornfield smells better than Karen's barbecue." The cracks were forming, and Karen's grip on her army of neighbors was slipping. The morning after I hung that steel gate, I found something strange in my mailbox. No threats, no notices, just a blue envelope carefully folded, my name written in neat cursive. Inside was a single sentence: "Please don't give up. Some of us are rooting for you." No signature, no address, just that. And somehow it meant more than any court order or sheriff's report. Because it meant someone inside Stone Creek, maybe more than one, saw the truth. But Karen wasn't backing down. If anything, she was cornered, and cornered people lash out. By noon that day, squad cars returned. 2 deputies I didn't know. Miller and Ramirez, serious men, their boots crunching gravel as they approached. "Mr. Coburn," Miller began, "we're following up on a formal complaint." I crossed my arms. "Let me guess, noise, dust, excessive corn." Neither smiled. Ramirez glanced at his clipboard. "Aggravated assault with a vehicle, again." I blinked. "Against who?" "Karen Netter," he said flatly. "She claims you intentionally obstructed the roadway, caused a collision, and made verbal threats." I almost laughed, but instead I walked them into the barn and handed over a drive. 3 camera angles, full metadata, her car, her speed, her rock through my windshield, even the 911 call she staged. They spent 20 minutes watching the footage. When they came back, their tone had shifted. "Mr. Coburn," Miller said, "this is clear-cut, false report, vandalism, we'll submit it to the DA." I nodded once, calm, "Appreciate you." That night, Karen's voice filled my answering machine. Raspy, furious, but trembling. "You may think you've won, you haven't. You've made an enemy, Wade, one that doesn't quit." I deleted it, but her words stayed with me. Not because of the threat, because of the fear hiding underneath. 4 days passed without a sign of her. 4 whole days of quiet, no Lexus. No HOA notes on my fence. No newsletters with my tractor plastered across them. Most people would have called it relief. I called it what it was, preparation. So I prepared too. I built a timeline, every incident, every violation, every video clip, stacked neatly in a binder like a field manual, but I didn't stop there. I went back to the county clerk's office, not for maps this time, but for HOA filings, public records, meeting minutes, financial statements. And that's when I saw it. 7 years Karen had been HOA president. 7. The bylaws only allowed 3. And in those years, thousands of dollars in dues had been collected, but no contracts, no receipts, no landscaping bills, nothing, just checks, every one of them signed by Karen. It wasn't just harassment anymore, it was theft. I scanned everything, sent it to Jeff. He whistled over the phone. "You want to go nuclear?" "I want the truth," I said. "Then we'll file civil. Misappropriation of funds, abuse of authority, harassment of a private landowner, and we'll CC every homeowner in Stone Creek." The next morning, I printed 26 copies of a 2-page letter. Not emotional, just factual: the tractor collision, the vandalism, the fraud, photos, links, county documents. I delivered them by hand, pre-dawn, slipping them under doormats, clipping them to mailboxes. By 8 a.m., Stone Creek's Facebook group was on fire. Screenshots poured in from Jeff's niece, who lived nearby. "Is this real? She paid her nephew with our dues. My husband's name is on this board consensus. He never voted. She told us she had jurisdiction over his land. We believed her." And then finally, Karen herself. "This is a smear campaign orchestrated by a hostile outsider. Do not be fooled by fake documents." But it was too late. The cracks had turned into chasms. That afternoon, 3 HOA board members came to my porch. A retired dentist named Glenn, a middle-aged woman with worry lines, and another man I barely knew. Each of them carried a copy of my letter. "Mr. Coburn," Glenn said quietly, "we need to talk off the record." I let them in, poured coffee. We sat around my table like men sitting at a ceasefire. "We had no idea," Glenn admitted. "She never showed financials. We trusted her." "She told us you were dangerous," the woman added, her voice low, "that you were unstable." I almost laughed. "My record's public, so's my deed. She lied to you the same way she lied to the sheriff." Glenn sighed. "We'd like to see the footage, all of it." By 3 p.m. they had. By 5, they'd called an emergency HOA meeting. And by 7:15 that night, Karen was standing on the porch of the clubhouse, screaming as her own neighbors voted her out. Immediate removal, gross misconduct. The bylaws were clear. Glenn texted me later, "It's done. We're sorry it took this long." But I didn't celebrate, because I knew Karen, and Karen didn't go quietly. For most people, being voted out would have been the end, but not Karen. The very next morning, a moving truck pulled up to her house. Not to load boxes, to unload them. She wasn't leaving. She was digging in deeper, reinforcing her walls. And when I opened my mailbox that evening, there it was. A certified letter, heavy paper, law office seal, Bentley and Finch LLP. I tore it open and read every word twice, then a third time just to be sure. Karen had filed a civil suit, claims of emotional distress, defamation, intentional interference with neighborhood integrity. I leaned against the barn wall, the paper trembling in my hands, not from fear, from exhaustion. After months of her drones, her signs, her vandalism, now she was twisting the law itself, turning me from neighbor into villain. I walked back to the old tractor, ran my hand along the scarred fender, and laughed under my breath. She thought she was scaring me, but all she'd done was hand me another battlefield, and I'd been fighting battles my whole life. The next morning, I drove straight to Jeff's office. He read the complaint aloud, his voice dry with disbelief. "Irreversible emotional trauma due to exposure to industrial farming operations." He raised an eyebrow. "Intentional operation of unlicensed heavy machinery," he chuckled. "She's laying it on thick." "She forgot the part where she rammed her Lexus into the so-called machinery," I muttered. Jeff flipped to the next page. "Harassment of HOA members through fabricated documents." He set the papers down. "Except those documents came from the county clerk's office, stamped, sealed, public record." "So we counter," I said. He smiled. "Exactly. Defamation, harassment, property damage, malicious prosecution, and while we're at it, let's petition for a full audit of the HOA." And just like that, we went on the offensive. The following weekend, the HOA board called a public meeting. Special session, landowner conflict review. They invited me. They invited Karen. I showed up early. Wore jeans, boots, clean flannel. Karen arrived late. Red suit, lipstick sharp as a blade, sunglasses indoors like she was running for office. The community room was packed. Folding chairs filled, whispers buzzing. For once, the neighbors who'd hidden behind their hedges came to see for themselves. Glenn, the interim board president, opened the meeting. "We're here to address the conflict between Ms. Netter, former HOA president, and Mr. Coburn, adjacent landowner. Both parties have submitted documentation. Each will speak. Karen stood first, and she performed. She had the hand gestures, the polished words, the trembling voice of a woman playing martyr. "This man has terrorized our community," she declared. "With aggressive machinery, with hostility, with lies. For 10 years, Stone Creek has been peaceful until him. I had no choice but to take legal action." Her words flowed like a campaign speech. Not a single mention of the tractor collision. Not a single word about vandalism. Just vague warnings of danger, disharmony, threats to children. When she finished, I stood. I didn't raise my voice, didn't bring out maps or binders. I just looked at the people in that room, the jogger who passed my fence every morning, the kid who waved when I drove the tractor, the mother who once dropped her keys and saw me chase them down the sidewalk. "I didn't come back here to make trouble," I said softly. "I came back to take care of the land my father left me. It's agricultural land. It's always been agricultural land. I've never trespassed. I've never harassed. But I've been surveilled, lied about, vandalized, falsely accused, and I recorded all of it." The room went still. "This lawsuit isn't just an attack on me," I continued. "It's an attack on anyone who refuses to bow to fear. If she can do this to me, a man with cameras, with documents, what will she do to someone without them?" Silence heavy, unbroken. When I sat down, Glenn cleared his throat. "Thank you, Mr. Coburn. The board will review the documentation." But I didn't need to hear more. I'd seen it already. In their eyes, the shift, the doubt, the realization that the woman they'd followed for years wasn't a leader but a tyrant. By Monday, 5 households had petitioned for an audit of the HOA's finances. And by Tuesday, Jeff called with news. Her lawyer just reached out. They want to settle. Quiet withdrawal of the lawsuit in exchange for silence. I looked out at the tractor, scarred but still standing. No deal. Jeff paused. "You sure?" "She built this on intimidation," I said. "If I let her walk now, she'll do it again, to someone without proof, someone without a voice." And so we prepared for court. Because Karen thought she'd dragged me into her arena, but she hadn't realized I'd been training for this fight all my life. The courthouse smelled like waxed floors and old paper. For most people, it's intimidating. For me, it felt almost familiar. Rows of benches like ranks in formation. A judge's bench that might as well have been a command post, and everyone waiting for one thing, truth or lies, to decide the day. Karen arrived in style. Red blazer, pearls that caught the light like weapons. Her attorney carried 3 binders thick with papers, looking smug as though weight alone could win a case. Jeff and I walked in quietly. No theatrics, just a single binder, one drive, and the confidence of men who knew facts couldn't be bent forever. When the clerk called the case, Karen rose like a politician on parade. Her voice filled the courtroom, soft at first, then breaking into tremors at all the right places. "Your Honor, for months I have endured harassment at the hands of this man. Heavy machinery operated at all hours. Clouds of dust choking my family. Threats, intimidation, emotional trauma." She pressed a tissue to her cheek, dabbed it gently as though tears might arrive on command. Her lawyer followed with a long speech about property values, neighborhood integrity, community safety. Words that sounded polished but hollow. When it was my turn, I didn't stand immediately. I waited, let the silence stretch until every eye turned. Then I rose and spoke simply. "My father taught me that the truth doesn't need dressing. It just needs light." Jeff clicked the monitor on. A still image appeared first, the drone Karen had flown over my field. Then another, the warning sign she'd planted. Then the footage. The Lexus barreling down the gravel road. The impact with the tractor. Karen's rock shattering the windshield. Her false 911 call echoing through the courtroom speakers. The silence afterward was deafening. Karen's lawyer stammered, "Objection, this is taken out of context." The judge leaned forward. "Counselor, the footage shows your client striking the defendant's property and then damaging it further. What context are you suggesting?" Karen rose, voice trembling now, not with performance but with panic. "He provoked me. He left that machine to intimidate me. He knew I'd be forced to pass. Jeff stepped forward. Your Honor, the easement road in question does not legally belong to the HOA. It is a conditional access strip never finalized by the developer. I have the county filings here. He handed over copies. Which means my client was entirely within his rights to operate and park his tractor where he did. The judge flipped through the documents slowly. Then she looked up, gaze sharp as glass. Ms. Netter, are you aware that you have no legal authority over this easement? Karen froze, no words, no excuses, just silence. Jeff didn't stop there. He pulled out the HOA filings. Furthermore, an independent audit shows thousands of dollars in dues unaccounted for during Ms. Netter's tenure as HOA president. That matter is under review by the district attorney's office. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Karen's lawyer shuffled his papers, sweat beading at his temple. Order, the judge barked, striking the gavel once. The murmurs fell quiet. She turned back to Karen. You filed a lawsuit claiming harassment and intimidation, yet the evidence presented demonstrates false reporting, vandalism, and misappropriation of funds under your leadership. Do you wish to continue? Karen's lips moved, but no sound came out. She glanced at her lawyer. He shook his head slightly, face pale. Case dismissed, the judge declared. With prejudice, defendant is free to pursue counterclaims. The gavel struck again, sharp, final. Karen slumped into her chair, pearls suddenly heavy around her neck. The courtroom emptied slowly, neighbors whispering as they passed. Some glared at her, some shook their heads, and a few, just a few, paused at my bench and gave me the smallest nod. Respect. Recognition. When we stepped outside, the air felt different. Lighter, Jeff clapped my shoulder. You just turned the tables. But I didn't smile, because I knew people like Karen don't accept defeat, not truly. They find shadows to crawl into, schemes to twist. And sure enough, that night as I pulled into my driveway, my answering machine blinked red. Her voice played, low and venomous. You think this is over, Wade? Court can't change neighbors. Court can't change the way people see you. I'll make sure you never feel welcome here again. I deleted the message, sat on the porch in the dark, and told myself one thing over and over. You don't plant corn in sand. You plant it in soil, solid ground, truth, and eventually it grows. But Karen's storm wasn't finished, and the hardest test was still ahead. The night after court, I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid, because I knew battles rarely end with gavels or signatures. They end when the noise stops and silence takes hold. For weeks, Karen's house sat lit up like a fortress. Curtains drawn, porch light blazing all night long, but the traffic to her door slowed. Neighbors who once carried her clipboards avoided her driveway now. Joggers took longer routes. Dog walkers crossed the street. And then one morning, as the mist clung low to the cornfields, I heard the sound. Boxes sliding, furniture scraping, a moving truck door slamming shut. Karen was leaving. No HOA newsletter, no farewell. Just the sight of her Lexus hitched behind a rental truck, bumper still dented from the day she rammed my tractor. I stood by my gate, arms crossed, and watched her go. She never looked my way. Not once. Just sped down the road, tires spitting gravel, vanishing into the horizon she couldn't control anymore. The neighborhood felt different the moment she was gone, softer somehow. Kids biked past my fence without their parents yanking them back. A couple waved from the sidewalk. Glenn, the interim HOA president, stopped by with a pie his wife had baked. We're sorry, he said simply. We should have seen through her sooner. I shook his hand. We all see what we want to see, Glenn. She gave you fear dressed up as leadership. That's a hard thing to untangle. He nodded, quiet, grateful. Over the next weeks, the corn came down row by row until the field lay bare and golden. My tractor, scarred from the collision, still worked like a stubborn old soldier. Every time I turned the key, I thought about my father, about resilience, about how some machines, like some people, were built to outlast storms. And slowly Stone Creek began to shift. The HOA board dissolved Karen's old policies. They stopped chasing neighbors about mailbox colors. They stopped fining kids for skateboards left in driveways. They started planting trees, hosting block parties, even inviting me, the man with the tractor, to join. I went once just to see, and I'll never forget the moment a little girl tugged her mother's sleeve, pointed at me, and whispered, "That's the corn man." Her mother smiled. "Yes, honey, he makes the fields pretty." I felt something then, something I hadn't felt since coming home from war, belonging. But Karen, she didn't vanish quietly. News traveled back in whispers. A financial audit revealed tens of thousands missing from HOA accounts. Checks traced to her nephew, her sister-in-law, even to a boutique downtown. By the time the DA pressed charges, she'd already skipped town. But truth has long legs, it catches up. Months later, I saw it in the paper. Mugshot. Headline, former HOA president arrested in fraud scheme. I set the paper down, not smiling, not gloating, just still. Because this was never about revenge. It was about dignity, about proving that fear doesn't get the last word. That night I sat on my porch, the fields quiet in the moonlight, and thought about everything Karen had tried to take. My peace, my land, my name. But none of it worked. Because the truth doesn't break, it bends, it weathers, and then it stands tall again like rows of corn after a storm. I whispered the words my father once told me. "Make the land work, son, and it'll take care of you." And I realized he hadn't just meant soil. He'd meant all of it: life, people, integrity. Sometimes the hardest fields to tend aren't the ones under the sun. They're the ones inside your chest, where bitterness fights hope and anger fights patience. And sometimes, the harvest comes when you least expect it. That's what Karen never understood. Power isn't control, it isn't fear, it isn't neighbors whispering your name in dread. Real power is quiet, it's steady, it's living a life no one can twist or take away. The tractor coughed to life one last time that evening, the old engine purring against the silence. I drove it slow along the edge of the field, golden dust rising in the twilight. And I knew deep in my bones, I hadn't just survived Karen. I'd outlasted her. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one, the truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.